Welcome back, everybody, to the deep dive. Today, we're going to be talking about Maneater, the iconic 1982 Hall Oats hit. You know it, you love it, but we're going to go into the background of this song and see, how it came together and really try to understand the story behind this amazing song. And we've got some pretty interesting insights here, including a few things that came straight from the songwriters themselves.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think a lot of people, when they hear Maneater on the radio,
Yeah.
they might think, oh, this is just a fun 80s song, but it really is kind of like a little time capsule.
Yeah.
And it has a pretty interesting backstory to it. So, yeah, I think we're going to have some fun uncovering that.
Yeah, and maybe uncover some things that even longtime fans might not even know. So first of all, just like right off the bat, when you think of the meaning of Maneater, right? It's kind of like a seductive woman who's using men, for her own personal gain and, to get like expensive things and stuff like that. And you can see that in those lyrics, the she-cat tamed by the purr of a jaguar.
Hmm.
Or, the whole like Tiffany twisted, comparing it to Hotel California. I mean, it's like it's all there, right?
Yeah, I think right when you hear it, you kind of get that like classic femme fatale kind of image. And,
Hmm.
uh, and that's kind of been a trope in music for decades. So that's definitely one interpretation.
Yeah, but here's the twist. John Oates has actually said that the man-eater in the song is not a person at all. He said that it's actually 1980s New York City, and he was saying, in the 80s, New York was all about like success and money and greed, and it could consume you if you weren't careful. I mean, that puts like a whole different spin on the lyrics, doesn't it?
Right. Yeah, and especially when you think of like that era. The whole Wall Street, like greed is good kind of vibe. It really reframes the lyrics. And you can definitely see how like the city itself could be this like metaphorical man-eater devouring people through their ambitions. And maybe that's why it's still so popular today.
Yeah.
It could be both, right?
Right.
It could be about, this woman, but it could also be about like society. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely got like these different layers to it that make you think. But let's move on to the sound of the song. I mean, I think the sound is just as iconic as the lyrics, especially that saxophone solo. It's like you hear it and you know exactly what song it is.
Yeah, that solo by Charles DeShout, Mr. Casual, as he's known, is really something special. What's interesting about the solo is how almost vocal it is.
Yeah.
It really mirrors the lyrics and how there's this kind of seductive, but also a little bit dangerous undercurrent to them. And the way the song is structured, it really puts the saxes front and center. It was like a showcase for Deschamps, and he totally nailed it.
Oh, for sure. And you know that saxophone solo wasn't just like a cool addition. It actually helped the song become a huge hit, like a massive hit. Maneater was #1 for 4 weeks in the US, which made it the biggest US hit of the whole decade to have a saxophone solo. I mean, that is a pretty specific and interesting stat right there.
Yeah.
It really shows you the power of that sax. And it was also big around the world. It hit #4 in Australia and #1 on the Canadian Adult Contemporary chart. And on the Billboard Hot 100, it was in the top 100 for over 20 weeks. And 9 of those weeks were in the top 10. It's a big deal.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that sax hook is such a huge part of why the song is so catchy and memorable.
Yeah.
Like, it's almost like another character in the song, right?
Yeah.
On top of the lyrics.
Totally, yeah. Now, another big part of this song is the songwriting partnership, particularly with Sarah Allen. And she gets a co-writing credit on the song, and she was also Daryl Hall's girlfriend for many years. So what was her contribution?
I think it's really important to recognize Sarah's role in the success of Hall & Oates. They had a really special connection. Daryl Hall has talked about how amazing Sarah was at tapping into his thoughts and helping him to kind of refine his ideas. I think he said something like, she's really good at jumping into my thoughts and helping me to sort of coalesce them. That's a really strong partnership right there.
Yeah, and she didn't just like give him general feedback either. She had a really specific suggestion that Daryl thinks was a big reason why the song became such a hit. Apparently, the original chorus was longer, it had more words after the line, she's a man-eater, but Sarah convinced him to cut it off right there. What do you think it was about that like really concise phrasing that made it work so well?
That's a great question. And, it really shows how much thought goes into crafting a hit song. Like every little detail matters. I think ending the line with she's a man-eater and like cutting it right there, it really gives it impact. Like it's such a strong statement and it lets that image sink in. If there were more words after that, it might have lost some of its power. It's like that old saying, less is more. It definitely applies to songwriting.
Totally, yeah. Now let's talk about the music video for Maneater because it's definitely memorable. I think it's been described as a disjointed affair. Which I think is a pretty fair description, especially for early MTV videos, what was going on there.
Yeah, so early MTV was like the Wild West of music videos.
Yeah.
Budgets were a lot smaller, and there weren't really any rules yet. So you
Sure.
ended up with a lot of like really weird and creative stuff. And apparently Hall Oats didn't really get too involved in their videos. They kind of let the directors do their own thing, which sometimes led to some pretty strange results.
Yeah, so it's basically a bunch of close-up shots of the band performing in this like dark club. And then they cut to these like random images of a woman and then there's the panther, like a real live panther. What was up with that?
Yeah, the Panther is what everyone remembers, right? And it's pretty funny when you think about it. Like, they took the Maneater thing so literally that they had to put an actual dangerous animal in the video. And apparently it cost them like 10 grand for that little cameo, which is pretty wild.
Yeah, and there's that story about how the panther actually got loose on the set and Daryl Hall just walked off. That's pretty legendary, and it kind of sums up like how chaotic those early video shoots could be. It definitely adds to the whole Maneater story.
Yeah, for sure. It makes it more interesting, right? So Maneater has obviously become a big part of pop culture.
Oh yeah. For example, it was in the movie Runaway Bride. And if you remember the movie, it's about this woman who leaves all her fiancés at the altar. So the connection to Maneater is pretty obvious. It adds another layer to how the song is used in pop culture, right?
Absolutely. And the song is still super popular. Hall & Oates usually open their concerts with it, which
Yeah.
tells you how much energy it has and how much people still love it. John Oates has talked about how grateful they are to have so many hits that have lasted all these years, and you can tell they really enjoy performing them live.
Yeah, and it's influenced other artists too, like Nelly Furtado's 2006 song Maneater. That was directly inspired by the Hall & Oates song,
Yeah,
and that just shows you how much the song has resonated with people over the years. It's pretty cool.
it is. And then there's the more like fun tributes like that spoof video for the book The Manny. They changed the lyrics to be about a male nanny, which is pretty clever. And there was Grace Mitchell's cover for The Secret Life of Walter Mitty soundtrack. That introduced the song to a whole new generation.
Mm.
And then there's the Call & Oates hotline where you can press 3 and it plays Maneater. I mean, that is like peak fandom right there.
Yeah. That is awesome. It's amazing how much of a cultural phenomenon this song has become. And to keep things fresh, John Oates teamed up with Sasquatch in 2021 to do a new version of the song. That's a pretty unexpected twist, right?
Yeah, it just shows you that even after all these years, people are still finding new ways to be creative with this song, and that keeps it alive for new audiences. So going back to the songwriting process for a second, John Oates said that he originally wrote the chorus with a reggae feel, which is pretty different from the final version.
Yeah, and apparently when Daryl Hall heard it, he was like, Hall & Oates don't do reggae. It's kind of funny, right?
Yeah.
It just shows you how different people's musical tastes can be, even within a band.
Yeah, and it shows you how important collaboration is.
Mm.
Sometimes you have to try different things and figure out what works best for everyone. And even though the reggae version didn't make it, I wonder if that initial idea kind of influenced the final sound in a subtle way. And then Daryl Hall took the chorus and reworked it, and then he and Sarah Allen finished writing the lyrics.
Right. And then to add another layer to the whole Maneater mystery, John Oates said in a recent interview that the song was actually inspired by Kelly LeBrock. So now we have another possible muse for the song.
Yeah, it really makes you think about where songwriters get their inspiration from, right? Like, is it a real person, or is it an idea, or is it a mix of both? And John Oates mentioned how it's kind of similar to that Del Shannon song, Little Town Flirt, with that line, "Here she comes." It all ties back to that classic trope of the, like, alluring but dangerous woman, which is a theme that pops up in music a lot.
Yeah, it's fascinating. So as we wrap up our deep dive into Maneater, I think we've uncovered a lot of interesting stuff. We've got the different layers of meaning, the woman in the city. We talked about the iconic saxophone solo, the songwriting partnership with Sarah Allen and her really crucial lyric suggestion. And then, of course, there's the crazy music video with the Panther. It's a pretty amazing story, as amazing as the song itself, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. From the very beginning to now, it's had a pretty fascinating journey.
So here's a final thought for you to consider. When you think about all the different parts of this song's story, the seductive woman, the greedy city, the reggae influence that almost was, and the possible inspiration from Kelly LeBrock, what does all this tell you about how iconic songs are created and the impact they can have? It's something to think about the next time you hear that sax solo. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.